Welcome to the On a Mission Mojo podcast, where I have the pleasure of interviewing impact-driven founders, entrepreneurs, authors, and business experts who are actively working to create a positive difference in our world. I'm your host, Lori Young, a branding specialist, certified master marketer, and a passionate advocate for brands that possess heart, soul, and an unwavering commitment to drive change for humanity. It takes grit, a visionary mindset, and an abundance of mojo to navigate this journey. And the stories I share will undoubtedly ignite your passion. If you're seeking an infusion of inspiration, motivation, and valuable insights to amplify your impact, let's dive right in. Welcome to episode 5 of On a Mission Mojo. I have one of my favorite people, happens to be actually one of my clients who has got some amazing gifts, amazing spiritual and intuitive gifts that she offers the world. And I just wanted to have her on the show to be able to share her mission and to share what she's doing in the world. So let me introduce to you Colleen St. She is a spiritual teacher and expert intuitive development coach. She became known as the healer's healer because of her pioneering work with spiritual practitioners, wellness professionals, and other light workers. Colleen has been in private practice for decades and has authored the Peace Warrior Guidance Deck and her book, The Other Side of Addiction, The Afterlife. And if you don't mind, I would love to kind of even dive into a little bit about that book, because that's probably actually one thing that I have not heard about. So why don't we just start, Colleen, and have you just kind of share a little bit about your mission in the world?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And thank you for being a blessing to my brand because it's getting a voice and getting the legs that it needs and it desires through your company. So thank you. So, the work that I do is a soul mission, but it's also like a heart-centered practice that we are all connected. And the gifts that I bring to the table are the fact that I am an intuitive, and I had, as you said, decades of practice doing spiritual guidance, mediumship connection, and I've had the privilege of being on the front lines of humanity for over 100,000 guests and working through them, their most vulnerable periods of their life, which is the most sacred time in our growth. And whether someone was sharing their confusion or sharing their grief or sharing their awakening, it was always a privilege. And it was the best classroom I could have ever participated in as far as my soul's education and growth. So from that, I gathered that everything is always made really difficult. They take really easy things and they make them incredibly difficult. And I always tell my students, I learn and I teach like a 5-year-old. I want to know, what is the easiest route to get there and the why? So I create practical methods to handling difficult situations by understanding and teaching people what is organic to us. And that's what is our patterns that we're experiencing. What are the things that are working for us? What are not working for us? And with all those little insights combined, it creates this huge connection with our true self, which is our intuitive self. And the greatest thing I think I can bring to the table is letting everyone know that I don't have an extra chromosome to have this gift. It is something that we're all born with, but like a muscle, it needs to be developed. It needs to be nurtured and it needs to be, practiced. And that's how we develop into our higher intuitive selves and integrate all parts of ourselves.
Awesome. So I know you have a really incredible story, and I guess I would like to, I would like to understand kind of your own journey, how you got started in this work, and what was the catalyst, and how have you kind of developed? Because I like what you said. Everyone has an intuitive ability.
Yeah.
And I do believe, though, and I could be totally wrong, I do believe that certain people have like certain like spiritual gifts.
Well, we all have them, right? So, but it really is like, I want you to look at your soul, right? As
Mm-hmm.
everyone has a soul, but
Mm-hmm.
not everybody's soul is in the same classroom. So we look at age as a chronological human experience where,
Right.
okay, you're 5 years old, you should be doing this developmentally. You're 10 years old, 18 years old. Okay, well, that's just the skin suit. The soul
Mm-hmm.
is actually the indicator of our age, right? Because it's our soul's age. Have you ever met a young child and they start speaking, or they're a prodigy and you're like, who's in there? Like, that's an
Right.
old soul. But then you meet
Right.
the adult who's still acting like a child, right? So
Right.
that's a young soul. So
Mm-hmm.
if we could just take a peek into looking at people on a soul age, that also interprets into our spiritual intelligence and our spiritual gifts, because through our soul age and our human experiences, we gain wisdom. So we're
Mm-hmm.
going through earth school, and some people are in a classroom that is 10th grade and some people are in kindergarten, right? So even
Mm-hmm.
though we live in this collective, so our intuition and our spiritual development and our spiritual gift also go hand in hand. Well, how old is our soul? And
Mm.
so that's why sometimes it seems that some people are highly, highly connected to it, because it's not everyone's journey to awaken in this lifetime. Sometimes
Mm.
people are teachers to us. Their unawakened state creates a teacher to our awakened state to then
Mm-hmm.
either heal the shadow parts of ourselves or the triggers or whatever's happening within our own self. So not everybody's swimming in the same race. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
people are meant to be on the sidelines, and some people aren't even at the stadium. So it's very independent
You're
to
right.
each individual. But um, yes, I mean, I think that we all have the ability to connect, but
Mm-hmm.
at what level is most definitely what are we willing to invest in our personal work as well, in self development and realizations. Going back to your original question, how did I end up here? Definitely was not a plan. Um, I was raised very strict Irish Catholic, so this was not even in the works for. I'd never seen a medium or an intuitive before I became one.
Okay.
So
Okay.
ironically, most people have a history of like finding themselves on a yoga mat and don't do yoga. Um, or I found it in a bookstore,
Okay.
and I was in a unhealthy relationship for many years. I got married young and was, a good Catholic girl, sticking to my vows and making the bed I slept in and staying in it. But it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't good for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my daughter was young, and I was walking through Barnes and Noble, and
Okay.
literally a book flew off the shelf. And of course, I prayed, because that's the metaphysical section, and that was the part to stay away from. And the book that fell was called Messages from Your Angels. And I thought to
Okay.
myself, like, this doesn't seem like bad. It's like they're angels,
Uh-huh.
right? So,
Right.
like, a dirty habit I was holding, I literally bought the book and
Okay.
read it like I was reading like something horrible, and I hid it from everybody. And
Mm.
the book changed my life. And I'm talking, I woke up and nobody was awakened at that point. So it wasn't like this collective awakening we're experiencing where spirituality is much more embraced. It
Mm-hmm.
was really a slim pickings time, and not no
Right.
one was talking about it. Everyone was still very much living in that illusion state of like the system is all there is.
Right.
So I was mesmerized by the words on the page, because the book explained to me who I was. That all
Mm.
these feelings I had my whole life, that I wasn't just oversensitive. I didn't just need to get a thicker
Mm.
skin. I didn't just need to, not overreact, or don't judge people. It was always like everything I felt was shut down. And
Mm-hmm.
this book was like, you are an empath, and
Mm.
empaths feel things on a
Right.
completely different level, that people who are not in tune with people's feelings, emotions, and anything cannot feel.
Right.
And I felt for the first time, and I had a beautiful upbringing, I had a good family, that this book, whomever wrote it at that time, literally was the only person in the world that knew me because
Ah,
I felt so not alone. So I
yeah. And
self-taught.
validated.
Validated was,
Yeah.
I felt like just throwing it at everyone and just being like, read it. I'm not
Right.
oversensitive.
Yes. It's like I really relate to what you're saying, because from the time I was a little girl, people were saying to me, "You're too sensitive. You're so sensitive, Lori. You're so sensitive." And it's like, now it's like I'm like constantly asking myself,
Superhero.
okay, I'm sensitive, but I'm also like very empathetic, right? And very in
But your
tune with,
sensitivities are the gift,
yes,
because all of
exactly.
your intuitive connections come through your senses, right? Like,
Yes.
this is our speaker system. So like, they're just in a non-connected state, where I was highly connected in a emotionally disabled community. I mean, it was like, basically is that people were not emotionally connected.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was feeling, saying, or sensing was making them uncomfortable. So
Right.
shut it down
Right.
rather than
Exactly.
allowing themselves to get out of their box. And I mean, it's society as a whole, we were really programmed that way. So it's not necessarily like this person's fault, but holy God, if I heard for another minute, Colleen, you're so sensitive, like, get a thicker skin. I'm like, okay, like, how many more
How do I
skins
do
do I
that?
need? Yeah, right. Don't you think I'd choose that option if it was available?
Right. Yeah.
But
Exactly.
yeah, so the book really was just this amazing, and I have had I was in two very good careers. I was a spa director, and I worked in the dental field. I always was working with people,
Mm-hmm.
and I loved people. I still love people, and I just knew that I was meant to make a difference in people's lives, but I just didn't know what that route was. And I thought,
Right. What that
you
looked
know,
like.
yeah, I always had a strong faith, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the faith was like, I'll just let the light serve through me. However, maybe it's just comforting someone or helping someone along the way.
Right.
But when I read this, I was like, wow, I everything I have felt is leading me towards something.
Mm-hmm.
And the intuitive development part was just almost a second nature to learning more, because I had been always great at what I did and job wise, because I was a great employee.
Mm-hmm.
However, this was a passion to follow this like nothing else. Like, it didn't matter that no one believed in it. It didn't matter that I was hiding in a closet reading books. It didn't matter that I was sitting in parks reading in my car because I didn't want people to see. I couldn't quench this thirst. Like, I
Yeah.
just
So
wanted
it
more.
was like evident that it was your purpose.
Spark, but I didn't know why. I just knew something lit up inside of me, and it was
Mm-hmm.
incredible. So after slightly coming out of the spiritual closet, I kept getting the message that it was like, teach people. And
Mm.
that fuel was so huge that a backstory, when I actually opened my first office, I was actually on like state aid, because like everything in my world had collapsed.
Mm.
And it probably wasn't the best time to be like, logically, to look on paper and be like, oh, okay, we're going to open a business. We're eating from the
Right.
dollar store, but we're going to open a business. And I was
Right.
like,
Right.
I quit my job and I opened a business with
Talk
no
about
business
faith.
experience. Well, I have a slogan that says "F it," which means faith it.
Faith it. Okay. I love
So
it. I love it.
if I say "F it," just faith it.
Okay.
Because after sitting in the idea of what I knew and what I did and what I thought was right,
Mm-hmm.
nothing worked. But yet here is this amazing feeling rushing through me, so good, and I'm afraid to follow it. But
Mm.
everything I know feels crappy. So
Right.
I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And I opened up a business. I didn't have one client. No one
Mm.
even knew what I did.
Right.
And I just aligned myself and said, how do I serve?
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, I met one person. She happened to be a head of a networking group. And the next thing I
Mm.
knew, my whole business was only word of mouth. And I was booked out for months in advance because I did what was so organic, and that was just
Right.
channel the messages, like just
Mm-hmm.
give the insight that was coming through. They weren't my messages, they were messages from spirit. And
Mm-hmm.
it was literally the greatest and a privilege to be able to do that and bring me to this space now to know I've gathered so much wisdom from the hundreds of thousands of people I've sat with in
Right.
all walks of life to now be able to see where our world is needing awakened practitioners. And as light workers, where the fear is holding them back from elevating up,
Mm-hmm.
whereas therapists are getting all this intuitive insight, but yet don't know how to apply it to what it is that they've been practicing the book work. Whether it's the nurses who are working on the front lines, it's our front line workers are
Mm-hmm.
compassionate people.
Yes.
And if they continue in the path that they're moving in, they're just going to lead themselves to compassion fatigue.
Yes.
So it's
And
imperative that
burnout.
oh, the
Yeah.
exhaustion is real,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because they're giving on a vibration in which our world is not vibrating at anymore.
Mm.
So they need to elevate their vibration to be able to serve at that level in which their
Mm-hmm.
soul is encouraging them to do so.
So walk me through, like, what does it look like to like work with you when you talk about like, helping people evolve intuitively and spiritually? Like, help me understand like how you do that.
Okay. So it's a big, huge bag of tools, which I love,
Okay.
right? And so each person is their own fingerprints. So their
Mm-hmm.
fingerprints align with their soul prints. So when I'm sitting to start a session or start a mentorship, it is a customized packaging, right? There's an
Mm-hmm.
overall theory or theme that we follow, but each of the actual implementation, sorry, my nose is stuff, I can't say that word, implementations, um, is customized for the fingerprints that are in front of me. So
Okay.
one of my gifts so strongly is seeing patterns. So as
Okay.
soon as I am with a guest,
Mm-hmm.
everything is energy. So
Mm-hmm.
it is not their eyes that I'm looking at or even their story that they're following that I'm connecting with. I connect in with their teams in the light and I say, show me the patterns. Show
Mm.
me what is out of sync from the apple, banana, right? Show me
Okay.
what is creating the blockages.
Got
So
it.
what it is then they may be concentrating that this part is not working for them, but that
Mm-hmm.
is a symptom of something that is not working created from a source issue, right?
Okay.
So what we do is we go in and we analyze, we quickly can see the source of what is out of alignment. So
Mm-hmm.
we work on the healing of what is the source blockage. And that could be
Okay.
on an emotional level, that could be an ancestral level, that could be a karmic level. That all goes, very much into it. When someone is learning how to develop their intuition, first is understanding the foundation. Well, what is the foundation of the soul? What is the foundation of where does our intuition speak through? So
Mm-hmm.
I am proud of the fact that I can take really hard things and create very practical methods to
Mm-hmm.
apply into your everyday life with everyday situations. And that's the piece, is that it doesn't have to be difficult. It's a big tool bag that offers us a lot of growth, but the staple tools are all the same. What is your spiritual hygiene? Like, are you protecting and shielding your energy? What
Mm-hmm.
are you giving out between what are you receiving in? What are your
Mm-hmm.
beliefs? Where are your beliefs not encouraging you to level up? What is your fears? Going into shadow work, which is the parts of ourselves that we have silenced. Where are you
Mm-hmm.
being triggered? Where is this misconception of this is where you want to be, but this is the story you're telling yourself. So it's
Right.
really just a cool conversation between myself, the person, and their guides that kind of creates this blueprint that actually just gives a very direct route. Okay, here's your blueprint to heal. And here's the steps that you and I are going to work through. And if there's resistance, then we work through it.
Okay.
And, it's, I don't know, other word, it's like, it's so cool. Doesn't even sound like it does justice, but it is. I've been doing this for so long and I never lose the miracle and the magic of those moments that are just like, did you just see what happened? Like, did you just feel what happened? Like you can feel it in your belly. And like, we had talked before about like, what are your greatest success stories? It's like, it's those moments. It's just something that just shifts. We're like, oh my gosh, that's it. That is such a powerful role in the most minute, insignificant minute that it happens, but it's the trajectory of everything shifts.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I definitely, can say that there are definite times where I feel very much in line with my intuition, and I am definitely getting, spiritual messages. Like when I recently rebranded my company, and I kind of rebranded my whole podcast, and that was definitely intuitively led and
Absolutely.
spiritually led. It's funny because it came from like a breakdown. Like my spouse basically said to me, like, you're not happy. Like you've got to figure out like what is going to make you happy. And I remember crying, and I remember saying to her, I don't have the answers. I don't know the answers, right? Like I was blocked, that I just could not see the answers, but I allowed myself to just kind of sit and receive, I guess, because literally within a day, like all of the answers like came flooding in. It was so like weird.
Yeah, that is actually so textbook of what it is, right? My guides have always said, Colleen, you don't have to break down and be drugged behind a train to let go, the surrender, right? So, and what it is that we miss a lot of times the cues that things are not in alignment, where we keep moving forward to convince ourselves that, well, this was what I started, so I got to stick with it. And this is what I started. So we actually create this internal exhaustion because we have this idea that this is what it's supposed to be. And the reality of it is it's not necessarily what we think it should be. It's just because we told other people it was going to be that.
Yes,
it's like,
exactly.
I have my promises to that, right? So that, we have to, it's like life is under construction, right? And you went through a demo. And in that demo, you needed to break it all down to build it back up.
Right.
And when I would have clients that would come in, and I would say, like, have you ever had a reading before? Like, have you ever? And they were like, no. And they'd go, I went to the therapist. I did this. I did this. I did, like, you're my last hope. I'd be like, yes. I would be so excited. And they were like, what's the joy? And I'm like, because your resistance level is done fighting yourself.
Yes.
And you're now open to just knowing that you don't know. And getting comfortable in that space where you're like, it's okay not to know. And in that space, you have just given airtime to your inner voice to penetrate through all of the logic that tells you it should be this, it should be this, it should be this.
Right.
Divine inspiration will always come in a space that takes you away from what you know. And that's why it's often challenged. Because like the logic has this whole setup, and it's like, okay, this is the parameter that you told us is acceptable. And then here comes your higher self, and it's like, move directions, change your whole business. And you're like, what? Right. That's insane.
Right.
So that ping ponging, and we're all going through that right now. So what you experienced is when it happens, it comes through like a hug.
Mm-hmm.
It's like rebrand yourself, and then things just fall into place.
Yes,
And
totally.
and that is the kiss of flow, right? This whole divine feminine, that energy of the inner intuitive, the higher self, is it's all that strength and inner nurturing, that it's flow. But
Mm-hmm.
our paradigm has been really built on force it, grind it, you know, what is the saying? It's like, it's work's gotta hurt, it's like the
Yeah.
hustle, is real. And the reality of it is, to true alignment, it's about aligning your vibration with the graduation that you have made from your earth school, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
first level of your business gave you all the education
Mm-hmm.
that you needed to say, you know what, this is who I am now that I've graduated. So
Right.
you move the classroom, and now all the information in that new classroom can fluidly come through to you and then go into flow. Problem is, we
Yes.
keep trying to run back to our old classrooms, and
Yeah, yes. So that's, it's funny because I was thinking to myself as you're talking, like, I think what keeps us stuck in that old classroom or that old way of being is fear, obviously,
absolutely.
belief systems that we don't necessarily want to address, um, disappointing other people, right? If we are going
Yeah.
to move into a new version of ourselves,
Yeah.
it's going to create disappointment because people are like, oh, whoa, 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 wait a minute.
And a
You
lot
were
of
this
times
person for me.
people want to bring you back to where they met you
Yeah.
because they're still standing there.
Mm.
And that is where our self-love kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what I'm doing is for me is right. I'm not trying to hurt you,
Right.
but I have one run in this skin suit at this point,
Mm-hmm.
and these are my coordinates. And
Right.
a lot of times, as empaths, the former people pleaser is that we
Yeah.
try to spread ourselves so thin,
Mm-hmm.
and it ends up, I always think I was life's doormat, right? And at that point, when we start having to exercise these unapologetic boundaries of like,
Mm-hmm.
this is my next move, like this is my soul speaking to me. So if you're angry that my soul's speaking to me, then you must not be listening to your soul. So,
Right.
that's a you thing. It's not you.
Yes.
It's not me. It's you.
Yeah.
But it's done in a loving way. It's not
Yeah,
in
of
a
course.
malicious way. But it's powerful.
Yeah. So, we're kind of talking about some of like the tougher parts of like listening to our intuitive voice and developing that intuitive voice and really like stepping into that. Like, what do you find is like the hardest part of like carrying out like your mission?
So, two parts. So, first thing, when inspiration comes through to you, and this is for anyone who's listening,
Mm-hmm.
we on the human design need a plan, need A to Z figured out,
Mm-hmm.
attach ourselves to that plan,
Right.
marry that plan, become, so immersed in that plan
Yeah.
that we become rigid. So when
Yes.
that plan does not work out, it creates resistance, frustration, failure, feelings, all these different things. Right?
Mm-hmm.
When inspiration comes through from your higher self, your inner being,
Mm-hmm.
step A is given to you first. That's it. We
Okay.
want to push B to be presented, D, C, and all the other letters, right?
Right.
However,
Right.
that's not how it works.
Right.
Spirit will only deliver the first step. And
Okay.
once we accept it,
Mm-hmm.
integrate it, will be presented. Because if I give you F now, you
Mm-hmm.
have not experienced the success of A to E.
Right.
That any challenges that F bring, you don't have that confidence in knowing that you can and
Mm-hmm.
are capable because
Right.
you've experienced threads of that. When obstacles come into the plan, they are learning points. They are coming into our space at this vibration because our higher self knows the whole run. And if something comes in that is presenting an obstacle or an issue, it's not a detour to say abort the mission. It's
Yeah,
really
that's
just
an interesting point, because oftentimes I find myself like, if something becomes challenging, I'm like, like, am I on the right path? Because if it was the right path, shouldn't it flow easily and naturally?
but there's learning pieces in that that are being discovered now so that when things get really big in the next chapter, these small obstacles don't become big issues then.
Got it.
So it's clearing out the path. And it's also presented to have us question ourselves and saying, is there something that's preventing me based off a past pattern, a thought, or a belief from accepting this flow? And I can say, a good amount of obstacles that I experienced previously were my own doing. They were my own fears of growth and my own, Olympic medal self-sabotager of unconsciousness, right? So when I actually sit in, and I think when we started working together in the beginning, I said, I had to sit with myself and ask myself, what is sitting on top of me? What is sitting on top of me growing?
Right.
And it literally was the fears of opening a business decades ago that I had already surpassed, but yet they were so strongly integrated into my system that I never took a moment during my success and my growth to say, okay, I don't need that anymore.
Sure.
It just kind of fell to the back of the closet, but yet was showing up heavily when I was pivoting the business.
Right.
Because the old fears, the old narrative didn't have a space in the new growth, but yet it was tripping it up every which way I turned. Right. So one of the hardest things I would say in carrying out the mission hasn't been the work. Personally, it has not been that. It has been the business end of it.
Okay.
That's where I brought you in, because that was, talk about flow, right? I literally wrote in my journal that morning, I said, who helps businesses? Like, every store has a manager. Every bank has a manager. There's a system. Who does this?
Right.
And I literally Googled that phrase. Who does business management for online businesses? And your LinkedIn article came up. And I went right on and I booked a discovery call. And then the next week or so, I started working with you. Like, that was your aha moment where you were on the ground, like, I don't know. That was me. Because previously I had felt, well, maybe I'm just not tech savvy, or maybe I proved myself wrong in all of those. I can do these things. I don't want to.
Right. Exactly. And you shouldn't. Right?
I don't need to.
You're the expert in your craft, right? And
I love
bringing healing.
And it made me want to avoid. It made me avoid because I was like, well, I'm not a marketing expert. So I would hesitate and procrastinate on putting things out there because I find this work is so sacred that if I was presenting it wrong or not, I didn't know how to market it. I didn't know how to take all of my thoughts, my dreams, and the ideas and actually edit them down.
Right. Right.
And how do I speak to the audience that I'm aligned with and not try to speak to everyone so no one feels left out?
Right. Yes.
And
exactly.
So I can say previously what my issue was, was everything that you are helping me with now, because just to be able to have those questions of, well, what is your brand? Well, when you are an entrepreneur, sometimes you lose sight of why, who, what, because you're distracted by the technology or you're distracted by this or the emails or this. It just, to have all these moving parts it was overwhelming.
Yeah. Okay. I think one of the things that I talked about in or that when I introduced you, that I said I wanted to like it just at least touch on, and that is the book that you
Oh.
wrote.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me just a little bit about that, and
Okay,
maybe
so
how it's related to like your brand.
so the book is called The Other Side of Addiction, the Afterlife. And the reason that I wrote it was because for spending, decades in private practice is that addiction is an epidemic. And what I noticed in clients that were coming in when I formally did like the one-on-one mediumship and the one-on-one sessions at that nature was that everybody was going through a loss, and the addiction, suicide losses were very different than the loss of, a grandmother that passed away or something. Whereas families were still grieving addicted. They were sober addicted, whereas their loved one had crossed over. So there was all of these fears of, are they crossed? Are they in heaven? Are they in purgatory? Are they, there was
Right.
still that strong thread that there was suffering that was happening. And the reality of it is that, judgment's a human condition. It's not a soul condition. So when someone is going through, addiction, it's a thief of the loved one that you have, right? And it's when we pray for peace for people, we have to remember that we have to pray without attachment, because peace to me and peace to someone who is living in this struggle, it doesn't look the same. And people would think this is very odd because I don't have anyone intimate with my life that has passed from addiction. However, we're part of a collective energy. And when there is a societal epidemic hurting of people, it's just thinking last year, if there was 100,000 people who crossed an overdose documented, could be
Yeah.
higher, right? So then just think if each of those has one parent each, two parents, right? That's 300,000 people, a sibling, 400. Like, it is like a cancer that spreads, that it's not just the person addicted, it's a family becomes addicted to the grief
Sure.
because it's a living death. So I created the book because I took the insights of over, I think it was like 20,000 sessions I had just specifically around overdose deaths, and
Wow.
realizing how the fathers grieved, the mothers grieved, the siblings grieved, and created a book that basically said, this is what they're telling us. This is what they want us to know now that they've crossed onto the other side. And that their crossing is different than a traditional crossing, because if we want to look at ourselves as a soldier, this was a soldier that was at war, right? And they need to go home and debrief because they call this their school. That's home. So
Right.
the book is really just a healing tool to help take a collected amount of questions that I've been asked over, all those sessions
Right.
of, are they safe? Are they okay? And the one thing with the afterlife is we always have to understand this, is that they don't come through to let us know that they're okay. They truly come through to let us know that we're going to be okay.
Okay.
Right. So even if someone has a conflict in this world, when they cross free of that, because these are human conditions. They're not soul conditions. So when
Sure.
the soul returns back home, it's, even the life review is not judgment day. And so many different fields of, beliefs believe that it's a judgment, and it's not a judgment day. It is a day where they get to watch how successful they were. Right. When we do our life review, we're seeing the first time we rolled over. We're seeing when we held the spoon and rode the bike and learned to talk, and all of the successes that we have grown into that have become just insignificant
Right.
and lost, to remind
Yeah.
us how capable we are. And, the book was to help families growing through loss and the grief, because it's very judged, even if they went to a traditional grief group. Well, they
Yes.
chose it. They didn't. I mean, it's like there's so much stigma and judgment and everything. It's like,
Yes.
people, hurt is hurt, pain is pain, wounds are wounds. We need to stop, you know, believing that, yes, every loss is different because it's its own signature. but it's kind of this isolated space because, you know, the book is actually on its second edit now. I actually re-edited it. So I wrote it and had paid for the editing and put it on Amazon. And then after I marinated in it a minute, I was like, I don't like, it needs to change. There was grammar
Okay.
issues and stuff like that. So I redid the process, and I'm in the process now of re-uploading the second edition to Amazon for that release, and to
Okay.
be a support tool to people, and people who haven't gone through addiction loss have also said just understanding the afterlife has been helpful.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So
Cool.
I will definitely drop a link to that book in the show notes in the event
Cool.
that there are listeners that really resonate with your message of your book. I know I have a friend who lost a son to addiction. And oh my gosh, like every day, I think of her and I just think,
Well, because they lost him in the living, right?
yeah,
They
just the
watched their loved
grief that
one.
she's going to. And I it's probably one of my biggest fears is losing my child, or one of my children, right? And I can't imagine, he was 25 years old, and we have another friend whose son is, battling addiction, and her whole life is just in this constant state of worry.
And it's interesting because I've worked with, there's a lot of guilt and grief
Mm,
with addiction, because a lot of, during sessions, it would come through that let go of the guilt, that you feel relieved, at least you know where they are.
yeah,
And because it's an emotional storm of the plethora of emotions that someone's going through, because as a parent, we take on and we become enablers, and just to keep them, but unfortunately, with addiction, there's two people. It's the person you love and then the person who's addicted.
right.
And the person who's addicted is living at a very low vibrational entity
Mm,
state. And that is
okay.
what's dangerous, because they look like the person you love.
Mm-hmm.
And it's why recovery is very difficult.
Right.
People say, in working with the addicts, they'll say, they always feel like this looming over them, the cloud. Well, when I see, and I volunteer in homeless neighborhoods often, because I think that's just an important part of my gratitude, is like, they're still a soul too, and they
Sure.
deserve love and
Yeah.
respect. It doesn't mean you're just go in untrusting, like I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't go in any neighborhood.
Right. Right. Right.
But what I've seen is, when someone is currently under addiction, it looks like smoke, black smoke around them,
Mm,
because it's a low vibrational energy, that the feeding of it. And that's why it almost, it's like their soul's on a string, and it's
mm-hmm.
like there's this loss of life within them.
Right.
And
Right.
it's it's not an easy, um, no one woke up in the morning and said, today's the day I'm going to screw it all up.
Yeah.
Something was a catalyst, whether it was just one moment of a bad decision or whatnot, but no one woke up and said, today's the day I'm going to throw it all away.
Right.
So,
Right.
I'm like, and I pray for your friend, because as a parent, it's it's a hard it's a hard pill to swallow, watching a living death of your child.
Yeah. Yeah. It is
So,
for sure.
yeah.
So, we are needing to wrap up, and I always like to kind of end the show with asking my guest, like, what you feel is like your personal mojo or like magical superpower in this world, and like how do you like maintain it so that you can continue to be like a giving force with your mojo.
Good question. So my mojo definitely is my intuition. That's my
Okay.
superpower.
Mm-hmm.
How do I maintain it? So as a soul worker, you can't fake it till you make it. You have
Mm-hmm.
to truly live your practices.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
that means I can teach, but I'm also a student.
Sure.
So, and that's where, and remembering that piece of it is that, there's no piousness in this. We are all co-contributors to a collective club of growth and community and life. So the work that I do on healing myself is a contribution, because when we connect with our intuition and we utilize what's happening within us, we utilize all our own inner gifts and empower ourselves. When we lock hands with a person who's next to us, who's also doing the same thing, we create a really strong force that the wound of the world becomes less. And it all starts with our inner healing. So to keep my mojo up, I have to honor my growth, my days of rest, my days of having not a great day. Like I have to live the practice.
Sure.
Because if you don't, your vibration doesn't raise. And you can't keep accessing more information if you're still on a static station.
Right.
So my mojo is kept up by living the practices in which I'm taught and I teach. And through each people too, help me to remember it. You know, you can be working with someone and their guides come through with what they say, and you're like, I have a saying that I call wing slapped. It's when my guides, my angels, because I work with angels, could tell me something like 1,000 times, and I'm like dodging it because I don't want to know what I know.
Right.
And and then it's just that moment where like a human will come up and say it, and it'll be like, whoosh. Like, I hear it. So I call it.
I got it. I got the message now.
Yeah. So I call it wing slapped.
That's cool. You know? Yeah.
And I love if you're listening, how we can grow from each other so beautifully. Yeah. So, and I thank you and your company.
Thank you so much, Colleen. This was like a really how do I say it? Like just a very connected and just really spiritual conversation. Just I love conversations like that, and I just
easeful,
totally very easily flows. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that listeners got a lot out of this. And I will definitely be providing information on Colleen. I'll provide a link to her spiritual hygiene handbook, which I think could be very helpful for people who are interested in keeping themselves spiritually protected, so that they can go out. Because and any person who is running a mission-driven, heart-centered business has their heart and their soul like completely in it. And there is nothing more important than protecting your soul and protecting your intuition, your spiritual self.
Because your spiritual hygiene is your greatest bank account, right? Because your energy is your wealth. And you wouldn't just leave your bank account open or your ATM card in there with a Post-it with your numbers on it, right? But yet when we show up into the world and we don't have a protection, we're not preserving what it is, and you can't grow unless you spiritually protect, because it's like going into a house, someone messing it up, leaving for the day, cleaning it up, going out of the house, someone messing it up. It's like you're constantly in this loop. So if you find yourself in that loop, just maybe think, I'm constantly giving energy away and trying to restore it. I'm actually not expanding it. And that's where the spiritual hygiene really helps, entrepreneurs, heart-centered workers to thrive in allowing others to be in their energy, and to you to mind and really honor your own wealth account of your energy.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So thank you again, Colleen, for everything.
It was a pleasure.
And all right. That's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you for tuning in to the On a Mission Mojo podcast. Ready to dive into more incredible stories of people on a mission? Next week, I'll return with a fresh episode to ignite your passion for creating a better world. If you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a glowing review, and spread the word to all your friends. Head over to onamissionbrands.com for more great episodes. Remember, the world needs your mojo, so go out there and let your brilliance shine.